Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and you can blame collectors for retro game pricing. At least that's what Mort said. I'm joking. Mort's Garage did not say that. But if you watched his video yesterday, he basically kind of made a point to say that it's the collectors of retro video games that are paying the prices that resellers and eBayers and everyone else in between, we're the ones that are paying those prices, which is propping up the high prices that we see for retro video games. And he had a video yesterday that I caught. I don't watch all of his videos, but sometimes they pop up in my YouTube feed, and that one was pretty interesting to me because retro game pricing has been a hot topic since, I don't know, for the last 5 years, right? And so it doesn't seem like we're getting any relief in sight because prices are still high. And so, when Mort made the case, or he made the statement that, collectors paying these prices are kind of what's propping the prices up and keeping them high, I kind of had to ask myself, he does make a good point, but what's the alternative for certain games? Now, don't get me wrong. You have a ton of people on the internet who are amazing at finding really expensive games for really cheap prices. They just run into them all the time. People are able to pick up these massive lots of banger video games for $200 and things like that. One example would be Cody with a K. Cody with a K, that guy used to find totes of nothing but grails and pay, and he would just trade in like a used Nintendo Switch or something crazy like that, right? And is it possible for collectors to find those deals and make those types of things happen? Yes, it's possible. Is it probable? No. Does it require a lot of time, energy, and effort? Yes. Now, the thing is with most collectors, they're not collecting full time. I would say most collectors are probably individuals that have a steady 9 to 5. They spend the majority of their time working, probably caring for family, all that jazz. But their passion for retro video games and that hobby allows them to spend just enough time, maybe doing some casual retro game hunting, but they're probably doing a lot of their sourcing online or at retro video game stores, or perhaps they might visit a few retro gaming conventions throughout the year. And so when those are your primary options for acquiring retro games, and you don't have the time or the hunting skills per se to acquire these games for really cheap prices, what alternatives do you have outside of just buying them? Well, I guess you could wait and wait and wait some more and hope and pray and fast and yearn that one day you'll be able to find certain games at really cheap prices. But most collectors don't have that type of patience, part one. And part two, in some cases, the odds of you finding a grail game or a game that might be a grail to you, the odds of you finding that in the wild are extremely slim. I mean, you could go an entire lifetime trying to find certain games. And what are some examples of that I have in my personal collection? Well, I immediately think about a game like Rapid Reload when we have this conversation. Now, like Mort said, if collectors just chose not to pay those prices, it would force competition to increase, which would ultimately drive the pricing down. But in the case of a game like Rapid Reload, as is really low probability that I'm going to be able to find this game anywhere in the United States for a lot of reasons. One, this game was only released in PAL regions, right? There's another version of this game called Gunner's Heaven, and that is I believe, the Japanese version of this game. For those of you who don't know, Rapid Reload is what I would consider a mashup between Gunstar Heroes and Metal Slug. In fact, this game reminds me a lot of Commando Steel Disaster on the Nintendo DS. So if you're a real huge fan of run and gun shooters like I am, this game will probably be a must-have or at least a must-play on your wish list. Now, again, this game was never released in the US, so there's a very, very slim to zero chance that this game will be sitting in any retro game store in this country. So let's just say I was willing to travel, right? Let's say I was the ultimate game hunter and I decided to fly over to the PAL regions to find this game. I bought $1,000+ plane ticket, landed in Germany, and said, okay, now I'm going to find this game. Well, being in the UK still probably wouldn't equate to having a high probability of finding this game in the wild, because not only was this game not released here, it's still rare and scarce over there. It's still hard to find over there. That would be like someone from France flying over to the US and deciding that they're gonna go game hunting, I don't know, for a copy of, say, Silent Bomber. Now, Silent Bomber is probably a much easier game to find than a game like Rapid Reload, but that would be a lot of energy, effort, and time being put into finding the game. And for a lot of collectors, when they weigh their options, right? Like they say, okay, well, I could either spend, I don't know, $200 worth of gas driving around hoping to find this game that costs $200, or I could just spend the $200 on the game and get it in mint condition, shrink wrapped and delivered to my doorstep, right? And these are the options that game collectors have to weigh when they're looking for certain rare and expensive games. Now, there is a point where just buying a game randomly online doesn't make sense, and you may have to hunt for a game, right? And this isn't the case where games exceed certain price ranges. For instance, if you're someone who hunts certain Neo Geo games, certain Neo Geo games are $10, $15, $20, $30,000. Now, if you're talking about paying $30,000, well, yeah, maybe it just might make sense for you to buy that plane ticket and fly to that country to find that game, because in that case, flying to the country and finding the game would be a lot cheaper than just paying for it outright. And then, of course, you have all the added benefits of turning it into a vacation, a trip. You live out the memories, you have the experience and all that jazz. If you're a YouTuber, you can film it and turn it into content, all that good stuff. But my point is that when it comes to retro games and retro prices and what collectors are willing to pay, I think most collectors, depending on the game, have to weigh the options of whether or not it makes more sense to hunt down that game and wait and not pay the price for the game and hope to find it in the wild, versus just buying the game. Because some games, yeah, is it going to be easy for you to find, I don't know, a copy of Champions Return to Arms in the wild? Sure. You'll find that game way more in the wild than you'll find a copy of Futurama. You're not just going to run into copies of Futurama like that out in the wild, and if you do, they're going to be pretty darn expensive. So I think it really just depends on the game that we're talking about, and how much collectors impact the propping up of those prices. Because I do think that there are games that as collectors we get lazy when it comes to collecting them. You know, for certain games, I think you should be able to find a lot of certain PlayStation 2 games out in the wild. And if you just kind of go outside or go to your mom and pop shop or maybe do a little bit of game hunting, you'll be able to find that game probably for a really cheap price. Or if you're looking for very standard Nintendo games like Super Mario World or Super Mario All-Stars or Mario Kart, or certain GameCube games that we know everyone has, there are certain games that, yeah, you could find out in the wild for $5 or $10, but you're not going to find a copy of Metal Warriors out in the wild for $5. You're not going to find a copy of Hagane just chilling somewhere for $5. I mean, you can, but again, you probably spend your entire life hoping and that you'll run into that game. And if it's a game that you really want in your collection, some people just aren't that patient. And most collectors are not that patient. So I'm really interested to know what you guys think about this. Do you think it's worth it to spend a lifetime hunting for a game just to avoid paying the current market price? Or do you think that there are some games that you're just like, you know what, I'm just going to pay the price because I'll probably spend more money and time and gas trying to find this game than if I were to just buy it outright? I'm interested to know your thoughts. You guys let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.